Evening Boro fans, welcome to BoroFanTV in the third half with me, James Hutchingson. January and the transfer window have gone, and can the same be said for our promotion hopes this season? We're going to look back at the last two games, which have brought no goals and just 1 point, and we're also going to have a final look back at Boro's transfer business and a look at the transfer window in general tonight, and a look at the state of the play of the North East Big Three clubs so far this season. As always, we welcome your views and opinions, so get in touch and be part of the third half. My guest tonight is Les Langley. Welcome to the show, Les.
Good to be here, thank you.
Nice to have you on board. Is it fair to say that in terms of the Boro and their season, it promised a lot and it's delivered not what we expected so far?
Yeah, I think it's fair. And I also think you've had so many false dawns, if you like. You've had a manager, things have looked good. It's dipped and new ones come in, and from an outsider looking in, I'm looking at Tony Pulis and I'm thinking, is this really what Boro want?
Yeah.
Purposely, I'm not so sure. You're only 6 points away from the playoff spot, and he's a lot more defensive than I think Boro actually need at this moment.
Because it seems as though things have changed dramatically from when Gary Monk was in charge, and he maybe had his team set up which was very attack-minded and maybe wasn't so tight at the back, and it's almost gone in reverse now with Tony Pulis. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, and I think Saturday was a prime example. You're down to 10 men. You've got your leading goal scorer, who, yeah, he's not in great form, but you need a goal. You take Bamford off, replace him with a midfielder. Yeah. You know, things like that, it drives fans up the wall. Because everybody's sitting there and you want the forward putting on. Yeah. And then he leaves it till, 10 minutes to go before he brings them on.
That's right, yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people are pinpointing the strike force as a bit of a problem at the minute, but I think a deeper problem with the Boro is like creativity, a lack of creativity in the team. And it seems at the moment that there's only one outlet, which is Adama Traore. He's a bit of a wild card. If you'd asked a lot of Boro fans at the start of the season, they'd have said, can't really rely on him. We're not right sure where he's going to go. What do you think Pulis can do to address that problem?
I think playing him down the middle is a definite no-no. He runs down too many blind alleys for me. Yeah. I think the players need to know that when he's got the ball, the chances of him passing it and going for a 1-2 are very small. Yeah. I think he needs to be given a free rein, but he has to be told to get that ball in the box. Because undoubtedly, he's one of the most skillful players in that league. It just always tends to be his final ball. Yeah, yeah.
I've got a question here from Ian Smith, who's just pinpointed there, a question about Tony Pulis. He said, he's definitely what the Boro need at the moment. He's exactly the sort of manager to build something, get us up, and then keep us there. I'm not so sure if he's going to get us up, first of all. I think maybe if we get up, that might be his cup of tea. Then once he gets in the Premier League and he can possibly build a team that will stay in the Premier League. Tony Pulis, is he the right man to get Boro up to the Premier League?
We spoke off camera before, there's so many managers who were on that merry-go-round of sacked managers. Yeah. And they seem to regurgitate the same ones over and over. These guys get sacked for a reason. Now, you're 6 points, as I said, off the playoffs. You're not scoring goals. You can be the best defensive team in the world. You ain't going to go anywhere if you're not scoring goals. Yeah. And I don't think he concentrates enough in the attacking third. Yeah.
Get in touch with us, Boro fans. I'd like to hear what you think about our opinions and obviously where the Boro are going to go this season. Now, obviously, I've brought Les on the show tonight because he's previously worked on the North East Football Show. So we're going to look at the transfer window in general, not just how it's affected the Boro, but how it's worked for clubs across the country and mainly the three clubs in the North East. In terms of the Boro, we've already touched on the creative midfielder side of things. We did bring in Jack Harrison, who's got no first team experience in England. He's come from New York City on a loan from Man City. We've also got a player already at the club who's on loan from Chelsea, Lewis Baker. Do you know much about Lewis Baker?
I don't know anything about Lewis Baker at all. I don't really know anything about this. Is it Besic?
Yeah, got from Everton, yeah.
From Everton, yeah. I don't really know much about that guy either. One of the players who I do know a bit about, who you've got out on loan at Yeovil at the moment, is a guy called Lewis Wing.
Lewis Wing, who was at Childen,
He was at Childen just last season. Yeah. Now he's going to be a great prospect. I actually rang a football, well it was Darlington who I rang up after seeing him play 2 games, and I said, you've got to get hold of this guy. As it happened, Middlesbrough had already pinpointed him, but he's definitely one for the future. The guys you've brought in, I'm not too sure, I don't really know much about them. Yeah.
I mean, we've lost as well as bringing players in. Borough have lost quite a few players over the transfer window. Lost Cyrus Christie, went to Fulham. Guardiola, his contract was terminated. He's gone to Fulham. And we've also seen Martin Braithwaite and Ashley Fletcher go out on loans. Ashley Fletcher went to Sunderland. Do you think that was a surprise, Fletcher going to Sunderland?
I think it was a surprise from Borough's point of view, letting him go. He obviously has some pedigree there because he started at Man United. Yeah. Although he never made a first team appearance, you know, you very few poor players come out of Man United. I don't think it was a surprise that Sunderland actually signed him, because I think they would have signed anybody that could have got their hands on there. It's desperation stages for those. But he's a big lad. He's maybe what Sunderland need. But saying that, is he not what Middlesbrough need at this present time? Because if you're struggling, particularly like they were on Saturday, 1-0 down, you really could do with a big target man to hold the ball up and give your defence and your midfield a bit of a break.
For whatever reason, it's not really worked out for Ashley Fletcher at the Borough this season. But obviously, it just happens to be now that we're maybe short in the striker department. We have a striker that gets sent off on Saturday, and Rudy Gestede, who's now banned for 3 games. So again, we're further limiting our options. So like you say, there's an issue with scoring goals, and at the minute it looks a bit of a worry for Borough where the goals are going to come from.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I worry about with Middlesbrough is, and I'm repeating myself here, is looking at Tony Pulis. You haven't scored in the last 3 games, and you almost get the impression he'd be happy with that, as long as they're not conceding at the other end. And as I say, I'm repeating myself, but that goes back to what he'd done on Saturday, leaving your leading goal scorer on the bench for the last 10 minutes. I mean, he even brought Bamford off. Surely in that situation, have 2 forwards on. Go for it.
I think that was a bit of a concern of some Borough fans at the weekend. They were saying we'd rather have lost 2 or 3-0 and had a go than lose 1-0. But I see the other side of the argument as well, where you maybe say, well, we were 1-0 down, we're still in the game with 5-10 minutes to go, but is it the case that we've just got to go for it when we're like 6 points now away from the playoffs? Do we need to go for it in games more rather than being ultra cautious?
Absolutely. You're losing 1-0 and you take your only forward off and replace him with a midfielder. You know, it doesn't speak volumes. So anyway, we're going to talk about the transfer window now. We'll have a little bit more discussion about Borough's recent games, but we'll have a chat about the transfer window now. In general, Les, are you a fan of the transfer window? I think obviously there needs to be a time limit on it, but I think it should be pre-season and no other time. It's too disruptive. You have players holding clubs to ransom. You have them running the contracts down. You have clubs spending over what they should be spending through desperation. From Borough's point of view, the worrying thing that I found about the transfer window as well is what Tony Pulis brought in is all he was after. He didn't actually go after X, Y and Z and not get them. He got what he wanted, and he was happy with what he wanted, which would worry me that he didn't really push the board out further.
I've got one here. Tony Pulis said quite often in the transfer window during the month of January he wasn't going to spend any more of Steve Gibson's money. He felt that Steve Gibson had spent enough money last summer and he wanted to work with the players that were at the club. And Gavin Smith's come in with a question. He said, should Pulis have spent money in the transfer window? Do you think he should have spent some money, or do you think it's a fair point to concentrate on the squad that he's got? I know he wanted to trim the squad a little bit because he felt he had a too big a squad to work with.
100% I think he needed to spend, and we've spoke already about your lack of goals. You ain't going to get promoted this season unless you start hitting the back of the net. I do think, and Newcastle with Rafa is exactly the same. I think they are telling the fans what they've been told they have to say. I'll be amazed if that comment from Pulis about him not wanting to spend is true.
Right.
I'll be really surprised if that's a true comment.
Because there's a little bit at the minute with some Boro fans are saying, maybe this year isn't going to be the year. Let's take this year to take stock, give Tony Pulis a full summer, let him get sorted with pre-season, then identify which players he wants to bring in and have a real push at promotion next year. Do you think there's any element of truth in that, or do you think it's a case of things aren't going right and maybe that's what the club is saying, or some people are saying or thinking now to defend themselves against what might happen?
Yeah, I don't think any club is good enough to guarantee that they will stay in the division and build for next season. It's too big a risk. Look at Sunderland.
Yeah.
They thought, a lot of fans at the beginning of last season said, I hope we don't come straight back up. I hope we consolidate, build from within, and look at them, they're going to get relegated.
Yeah. I mean, talking of Sunderland, out of the three big North East clubs, which one do you think has had the best transfer window out of Newcastle, Sunderland and Boro?
I put a poll on Twitter last week and Newcastle came out on top.
Right.
With Middlesbrough second and Sunderland third. Now, I would have said personally Sunderland had the better one simply through the amount of bodies. Sunderland desperate for bodies of any calibre because what's there at the moment, they've threw the towel in. Middlesbrough I would have put last because as I say they've hardly brought anybody in. The people who they have brought in are unknowns really. I don't think Newcastle have done too bad with Kennedy. His first game, he was by far the better. He looked sharp, but then on Saturday he got took off. He didn't have such a great game. So I know maybe in defence of some managers, and a lot of managers have come out, and I know Tony Pulis has again, and he said he's not a great fan of the transfer deadline running up so close to fixtures, and it does cause a lot of unrest, like you've said, once the season started and you've got like a lot of fixtures in January, the month itself. And many people complain or say that during January, it's a difficult time to do business. There's not a lot of value for money in terms of the deals you get because, like you say, clubs try and get as much money as they can because they know that people are desperate to buy those players. Yet still, there's record deals done out there everywhere. There's Virgil van Dijk, Coutinho, Sanchez, Laporte. Lots of players that have gone for big money still. Well, just what you've said, you've hit the nail on the head. It's desperation. They will pay that amount because I said they desperately need them, and the clubs know that. And particularly when, if you're sat there and Man United or Man City come in, you're immediately putting another 20 million on top of their fee. And you're going to get it in January.
That's right, So, I've got some more questions here thinking about the Boro. Paul Nichols has put on here, do you think it might get worse before it gets better at the Boro? I think that's the question there. In my opinion, I think it's going to take time for Tony Pulis to get his ideas across. And I think, obviously, this season, yes, it'd be great to get to the playoffs, and I really hope we do make the playoffs. But if it does take another year or two, but like you said, there's no guarantee that we will be in a stronger position next year. You don't know what's going to come down, do you?
Yeah, I mean, your fixtures, Reading at home.
This Saturday,
Reading are struggling.
Yeah.
You would expect 3 points.
Yeah.
Cardiff away, maybe it's not. Hull at home.
Yeah.
You know, you would from now you'd be looking at minimum 6 points out of those 3 games. If you could get a draw at Cardiff, happy days. And then because Bristol City, they are seeing a bit of a fall after their cup campaign, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think, there was a few clubs, and there's a few clubs actually that are in the top 6 at the minute. You think, I wasn't expecting them to be up there this year, but they're there on merit. You can't say after 26, 27 games that a team's there by luck. They've obviously earned the right to be in the top 6, and there's a few surprise packages. I mean, you had it last year with Huddersfield in the Championship, and they kept it going for the full season. So, yes, there might be 1 or 2 teams there at the minute that you think, well, I'm surprised they're there. But they're there on merit now, and you've got to respect them and take them seriously.
Yeah. I don't think there's a consistency in Middlesbrough one way or the other to say whether it'll get worse or whether it'll get better, because you never know 1 week to the next.
It's a fair point. Yeah, I think that's a totally fair point. And I think that's the one thing that concerns Boro fans a little bit, which has been the constant throughout the season, in that they've been inconsistent with both Gary Monk and Tony Pulis. and that was just something I'm going to think about there. Tony Pulis has been criticised in some quarters over the recent performances, but can the finger always be blamed at the manager? Because you're thinking the vast majority of that squad are the players that were there with Gary Monk, and we had performances of the similar type then, like you say, lacking consistency. So is it always down to the manager, Les?
100%. It's not always down to the manager. If I can quickly refer back to Sunderland, if this was a normal job in football, as we know is not a normal job, players would be sacked. For some strange reason, in football you can't do that. I certainly don't blame the managers that Sunderland have had. Do I blame Pulis at Middlesbrough? Not much, but if you're out there playing on Saturday, you're 1-0 down with 10 men to go, and you take a forward off, what message does that send out to the players that's out there? Because to me, if I was out there, I'd be thinking, he's not going to go for the win. You know, where do we go from here? What are we actually doing now? We've took our only forward off, we've replaced him with a midfielder, we've only got 10 men. I can understand putting another midfielder in, but I'd be taking them from defence. You know, pack the midfield and have a go, but not take a forward off and replace him with a midfielder, no.
Archie Leach has come at me, he says, do you think Pulis should go? Personally speaking, he's only been here just over a month, and I don't want to get in the scenario of a manager getting sacked every 6 months or so, because I think that's the route Leeds United are going down, and it's not done them as a club many favours. I think now he's the manager, we've got to back him. That doesn't mean you don't question any of his decisions, because we're all fans and we all have our opinions, but I think to sack Tony Pulis, that would be just a complete backward step, wouldn't it, Les?
Yeah, you're starting from scratch. I certainly wouldn't sack Tony Pulis. I don't particularly agree with his style of play, and I don't agree with how he's been setting his teams out. But
he's here now, isn't he?
He's here.
Yeah.
One thing he does give you is a little bit of stability, but I don't think Middlesbrough should be settling for stability.
Yeah. Well, that's something we're going to look at a little bit greater detail further. I'm going to talk about the North East clubs and success and expectations. Just another one here, just with regards to the transfer window. Do you think Braithwaite should have gone without a replacement, or do you think that was a bad bit of business by the Borough?
Like I said, I think the transfer window, Borough had the worst one, because for some reason, and I was told this off a very good source, Middlesbrough didn't miss out on anybody that they wanted. So
there was one or two little rumours going round last week on Wednesday night that they were going in with an offer for Alexander Mitrovic at Newcastle. So do you think he would have been a type of player? Would he have been a like-for-like replacement for Braithwaite? I don't think he really would have, would he?
He's a bit of a loose cannon, Mitrovic, and whether that was ever an option for Middlesbrough, I don't know, because it was always Anderlecht first.
That's right, yeah. And I think he'd set his heart on going back to Anderlecht, hadn't he? Yeah.
So, yeah, I did hear the rumour, but I don't think it was everything that was going to happen.
Right. Just back on the transfer window, do you think it's something that just suits like super rich clubs like your Man Cities, your Liverpools, Man United, who can throw money around like confetti, while many clubs like Newcastle and Borough didn't spend any money, really didn't buy any players, they're just looking to do deals in loan terms. Do you think that's like haves and have-nots now in terms of the transfer window?
Yeah, Newcastle were never going to spend money. There was never any money there. But the local, you're right, Man United, Man Cities, your Liverpools, it's not a worry to them.
Yeah.
It's the clubs below them wondering if they're going to lose their prize assets. And you hear so many managers just wishing it was out of the way.
Yeah. Not
because it's more work for them to do to try and find players. They just do not want to lose any players. Yeah. Man United, Man City are not bothered. To say, but
they can afford to like take a loss on a player, can't they? They can afford to spend 50-60 million. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. But no, the low clubs, they're sitting there just hoping they should be turning the phones off.
Yeah,
That's what they need to do.
Yeah. I mean, another side of the argument is, I mean, I remember back in the day, I think the transfer used to have deadline day, and it used to be like the end of March. And a lot of clubs said then they wanted the they were opposed to the transfer deadline day moving to January because they always wanted to see if they could like get a little bit more income because the cup runs would be all over by January to say lower league teams. They wouldn't be in the FA Cup, they wouldn't have any cup football, and they would maybe think like February, March we might still be able to sell a player to a championship club or a first division club, whatever, and it was another source of income for them. Do you think there's any sort of scope for pushing the transfer window back further than the end of January, or do you think, like you said earlier, you think it just should be the start of the season and that's it then,
I think it should be the start of the season and that's it, but you also need to conform with the rest of Europe as well.
Yeah.
Because if only England done that, would be in a holy mess.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's, you could have championship clubs nearing the end of the season, might need a win to make the playoffs. There's nothing they could pull somebody in from Man United on loan.
Yeah.
Particularly if Man United maybe weren't going for the title, it would open a massive can of worms, that I think. Yeah,
and I think that's another thing now where you've hit on there. Players from the likes of Man City, Chelsea, going everywhere out on loan. I think the size of their squads, it's almost like the stockpile players up and they're going out on loan. I mean, goodness knows how many players we've had from Chelsea in the last 4 or 5 years, but there's certainly players going out on loan left, right and centre, isn't there? Yeah.
Well, I think Chelsea and Man City are known for it. They've, I mean, I think it was last season, there was one of them. I think it might have been Chelsea. They had something like 30 odd to 40 players out on loan at one point. Yeah. And what hope of young kids got coming through when there's 30, 40 ahead of them going out on loan who can't get in the first team.
Bringing it back to North East clubs, Les, we were talking earlier on about traditionally called the hotbed of football, the North East, with Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Sunderland. It's now almost one trophy in 45 years, which of course we won, but still one trophy in 45 years. It's a desperately poor return. Why do you think this has been the case, Les?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. One of the things that I have noticed, and I mentioned to you earlier, the non-league scene is on a massive upturn at the moment, whether it's down to disillusioned fans in the North East with the big three, I don't know, but in the past people have mentioned the North East's too far to come up, well, to attract the big players. Middlesbrough,
we did that 20 odd years ago.
Janino, Ravanelli, Brian Robson, Gascoigne, the list's endless. Middlesbrough have never had a problem. Newcastle haven't had much of a problem. Sunderland, yes, for some reason, but no, it's a strange one because it's well known that the North East have the best football fans. Yeah, but why
don't get much in return for it, do we? We
Not at all.
Follow our team all over the country. We don't get much in return. Really good question here from Wayne Beverley. In terms of the Borough, does the fact that we were recently in the Premier League give supporters a false idea of how big a job it is for someone to not only get us back there, but to keep us there in terms of the manager? And I think that's a fair point when you look at where Hull and Sunderland are at the moment, who came down with us last season. Sunderland is second bottom, Hull are third bottom, and they're both struggling. And yet Borough are having what we class as an indifferent season, but we're still on the fringes of the promotion places, the playoff places. Do you think that's a fair point from Wayne, Les?
I think fans that, what do you describe a big club as? Is a big club on its fan base, or is a big club on the trophies? Because if it's on trophies, there's not a big club in the North East. Fan base, be at the top of the league, but is he saying that Middlesbrough's then punching above the weight? I don't know. It's any team that gets into the Premier League, they've got there on merit. And I'm going to name drop here. I spoke to Paul Merson last season, and he said to me, he was so disappointed in Middlesbrough in the Premier League. He says it was because it's like they were invited to the best party in the world and they turned up without any drink. That's what he said.
And I think that frustrated a lot of Borough fans last year. It almost felt like they played with the handbrake on for most of that season. And instead of having a go in certain games, they didn't. And we was like, we'll stay in games. I think it was up till about March time, we hadn't lost a game by more than 1 goal. So we were in a lot of games, but the lack of goals at the end of the day, it killed us, and that's what got us relegated. And like you say, you see other teams that come up. I know Brighton this year, they're not safe by any means, but they're having a go. Teams are starting to score goals. They've got 3 on Saturday against West Ham. And I think you've just got to have a go. Once you're up there, there's no point being cagey, and you've got to try and get the points. And by doing that, you've got to score goals, haven't you?
I mean, if Huddersfield hadn't given it a real good go at the beginning of the season, they'd have been adrift by now. But they did really give it a go at the beginning of the season. Got a few scalps. Man United being one of them. Yeah. And it's put them in good stead, because otherwise they'd have been out of the league by now as it was. Yeah. In terms of like the trophy drought in the North East, do you think as well what contributes to it now is because you've got the likes of clubs like Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, all spending such a lot of money, they're taking all the competition seriously, whereas maybe in the past in the cup competitions they would put out like second string, which to some extent they still do, but because of the squads they've got now, they're taking all competitions seriously, and that obviously makes it difficult for anybody else to win them. I don't think it's the reason why the North East clubs struggle. I think the North East clubs look at it and it's now as not important as the league is. I don't think it's down to Man United and Man City playing strong teams, although undoubtedly it doesn't help. Yeah. But I mean, look how many years Newcastle haven't really took the cup competition seriously because they've wanted to concentrate on their league position. I think that's what's happening. Yeah.
And do you think that's what the fans want?
No.
The
fans, all fans want a cup run.
Yeah.
But fans are greedy as well. They want promotion. But the most important thing, and it doesn't matter whether you're in the Premier League, the Championship, First Division, they just want to see the team winning. Yeah. You know, so chopping and changing. I'm not keen on rotation of players. I think if you've got a starting 11 that wins a game, let them play the next game. Yeah. Let them play the next game if they win that one as well. Yeah.
No, good stuff. So, another 2 games gone for the Borough. 16 to go now. 16 points from the final. 6 points, sorry, not 16. I'm glad it's not 16. 6 points from the final playoff spot. Do you still think the playoffs are a possibility, or do you think it's likely that Tony Pulis has one eye on next season and what he needs for a promotion push? Love to hear your views on that, Borough fans. Saturday sees Reading, like you said earlier on, Les, come to the Riverside.
Reading and Hull next up at home. You would expect 6 points there. But the next game after that, Sunderland away, you would expect them to beat Sunderland as well. Yeah. Because Sunderland are no better at home than what they are away. So that you're talking that you should have 9 points if you can maybe get a draw.
The Cardiff game's going to be the tough one,
yeah.
But like you say,
you can write the Cardiff one off. But I would expect Middlesbrough to get 9 points.
Reading, Hull and Sunderland. Yeah. In a way, you couldn't pick those fixtures any better, really, could you? No, if you want to get on a run.
If you don't get 9 points out of those 4 games, I think that tells you a lot about where you're going to go. Get 9 points and you're right back in the mix.
Yeah, fair point. And obviously, just touching on Reading just for a second there, they were in the playoff final last year, Les, so it just shows how quickly things can turn from being a penalty shootout away from getting into the Premier League to now being 18th in the Championship, and obviously Yap Stam's under a bit of pressure. How do you think it'll go on Saturday at the Riverside?
That would totally depend on the team that Pulis puts out. I would like to think he would maybe go with 2 forwards. You know, Reading is shipping in goals, they're not winning. Middlesbrough's at home, get your 2 forwards on and frighten the life out of them. Yeah. I would see Middlesbrough winning on Saturday.
I hope you're right. So you think maybe a Sombalonga and Bamford, because obviously Stead's got a 3-match ban now, so you think a Sombalonga, Bamford up front, you think Saturday?
Yeah.
Have a go at them?
You know, this will say a lot about Tony Pulis. I mean, I know he's just brought Curtis Fleming in.
That's right, yeah.
Do you really need another defensive coach? These are little alarm bells with me.
I know he's been highly thought of for the work that he's done up at QPR with Ian Holloway.